So we're going to talk about extracting value from location intelligence. I'm Ankit, the SVP of engineering at Foursquare. Prior to this, I spent 15 years in AWS and Amazon. I led many of the big organizations over there, including Amazon Prime, AWS IoT, and Alexa. So if you want to talk about smart speakers, find me. I can tell you everything you can do with them. So for those who are not familiar with Foursquare, we are the leading location technology platform. We're in the business of deeply understanding the world around us by the places that you visit and how people move through them. We're really proud of our consumer app origin. Who here has been a mayor of a city at any point over the last 10 years? We got one? Oh my God, geez. All right, you guys need to visit more places. We are trusted by some of the biggest names in technology. So we power apps like Uber, Snap, Nextdoor. There's a saying in Silicon Valley, if your app has anything to do with location, it's probably built on top of Foursquare. And so we've been really, for the last 14 years, transforming ourselves to becoming the prominent location layer for the internet. So let's talk about geospatial data. Just from a show of hands, who are geospatial experts here? Anyone played with geospatial data? All right, played with it. Okay, so this will be informative. So geospatial data has a ton of potential. Actually, geospatial data is being used for many of the things that you have digital experiences around, and it's informing a lot of new business decisions. So let's talk about what geospatial data is and isn't. Geospatial data, also known as spatial data, represents all the features and objects on the Earth's surface. It talks about its shapes, its locations, and a wide array of attributes. So you can think about this as the buildings, everything that touches the Earth. It's effectively our view of the world. So typically, this data is used to create maps. It's also used for different forms of spatial analysis. For example, if the roof of this building crashed, emergency response will know that here's the entry and exit points to this building, roughly where are people located in the occupancy, and hopefully our lives are saved. It also supports a growing array of decision-making for businesses. A big part of geospatial data is it gives businesses the ability to make much better informed decisions. And we'll get into some of the problems that it solves. So why is it useful? Well, if you say the first thing is it makes most of our lives easier. So for example, how many of you checked the weather in Boston before you packed for this trip? Yeah. How did you choose what restaurant to go eat yesterday? Did you pull up an app to figure that out? Let's say in the last week, did you use a navigation app and it rerouted you because of traffic? All right. And the last one goes for saying, if we don't get tracking on something and know when it's delivered, we're probably going to never buy from that place again. And so we have an immense amount of ability to understand when things arrive. All of these are solved by geospatial data. For businesses, this is growing. I'm picking a few use cases, but if you look at companies like McDonald's, Starbucks, a bunch of others, how do they choose where to plant their next store? How do they expand their footprint without cannibalizing their business? How do they create the success factors to create a business that sustains over time? For example, you'll likely not see over COVID any McDonald's or Starbucks shutting down. It's because they did a lot of data crunching to understand where their demand would be. Similarly, you can measure and analyze media. For example, if you're Starbucks again, and you're marketing a healthy Frappuccino, what you can do is understand, are you increasing visitation to your stores? And you can track people going there. Another important metric could be, well, am I attracting people who typically are more health conscious? So for example, am I seeing a larger percentage of people who are coming in from gyms than I typically did? And so these are actually real life studies that they did on top of us. Optimized transportation. So IoT devices everywhere. In sensors, a large part of how companies are driving efficiency is putting IoT sensors on their trucks. They're optimizing their supply chain to get the goods to the right person at the right time. Now, when you survey people, most every executive says geospatial data plays an important role in how they drive business success. In fact, over 90% of them say over the next 3 to 5 years, this will play a bigger role. However, geospatial data isn't being used to its full potential. Less than a quarter, or around a quarter of the companies in this room are actually leveraging location intelligence to its full potential. And let's get into why. So there are many, many pain points with geospatial data. The biggest thing around this is there is a slow time to value. And like many things, why is it slow? Because it's very costly to do. And so there are roughly around 4 buckets of why geospatial data is hard to work with. The first is you have to transform your data. Effectively, when you want to do geospatial analysis, you need to put your data in some form of like tile system to be able to overlay it, to create patterns. You typically need a lot of additional data sets that you don't have. You need to acquire these. You need to maintain them. You need to actually be able to use these. And they need to be of high quality. Geospatial data, more like any other form of analysis, if you don't have high quality data, you're going to have garbage results, and this is going to drive your team and yourself crazy. Data exists in silos. So this is true for many enterprises and every large corporation is you'll have your online sales in one place, your offline sales in another, you'll have your customer interactions in a third, you may have your logistics information in another. All of these exist in different places in your company, and they all have very different data models. It's really hard to merge these things together. The third part of this is you need highly specialized individuals to work on this. You need geospatial experts. These are hard to find, they are far and few none, and they typically require dated GIS systems. These are hard to use, they're expensive to set up, they have a lot of hardware and software costs associated with it. If you figure out how to do the first 3, you're left with the last part. After you produce results, they're really hard to share. Most people who want to interpret results from a geospatial analysis need to be geospatial experts. So it isn't the case that it helps inform business decision making. You need to have experts on your team to interpret them. So I'm really happy to say launching on this stage at Foursquare, we're launching first of its kind geospatial knowledge graph. And our aim is we're going to transform how businesses leverage geospatial data. The cool part of this is I believe it's going to be a step function in enabling every developer to access geospatial data and analysis. And we'll get into a few examples of why this is important. But first, let's get into what a knowledge graph is. A knowledge graph is a way of representing complex and dynamic relationships with semantic meaning. Semantic meaning allows humans and machines to understand what the data means. This enables companies and analysis to find unknown patterns, trends, relationships with one of them. The big part of, if you take social, right? 10 years ago, there was a social graph. And the reason why the graph was so important for social was you had a bunch of interesting relationships with people. People who they liked, people that they had relationships with, people that shared the same content. It's the same thing with geospatial data. In fact, by 2025, 80% Gartner predicts that we'll be using graph databases for data and analytic solutions. Mind you, this is up from just 10% a few years ago. So there's a huge interest and movement towards using graph databases to understand geospatial data. So let's talk about why Foursquare was uniquely situated to kind of unlock what is geospatial data. So Foursquare is in the business of deeply understanding the world around us. We spend a lot of time and effort. We have geospatial experts. We have data teams that are focused on understanding everything on the Earth's surface. Here are 2 primary data sets that we produce for customers in many, many different types of products. The first on the left is places. So these are the points of interest around the world. We have AI and machine learning models that help us build a database of 120 million venues around the world. We provide a rich set of attributes. We also use our first-party data to human verify the accuracy of this. On the right, we have movement data. This is how people move around the world. We have our own proprietary technology that allows us to get multi-sensor data from cell phones. We track around 9 billion visits per month. We have 500 million unique devices globally. Both of these, I would call data products, were built on almost entirely different technology stacks. When we worked with customers, we would have to apply our own geospatial experts to produce solutions for them. Our companies that we worked for, mostly being in the Fortune 500, didn't have geospatial experts. And so we were constantly going through this pattern of having to build one-off analysis and solutions. This is where we came with the idea that we should leverage graph technology and knowledge graphs to build what we call the Foursquare graph. So what is the Foursquare geospatial graph? So at the top layer is a graph. It is a knowledge graph that enables us to understand patterns and relationships with data. It's really easy to use. You can use declarative SQL against it, and you can produce reports in the matter of hours and minutes versus days and months. The most important thing, and when you think about a system that you're trying to build with a knowledge graph, is it's the data that contains within it. And so what we did was we broke down all of our systems. We slayed some monoliths and broke down our data models into very fine-grained data sets. The reason why this is important if you're trying to build a knowledge graph is you want individual data sets that can be combined and brought together and find interesting relationships with them. The only way you can do this is if you break things down. So this may be really hard for anyone to read, but there's shapes of buildings, there's boundaries, there's roads, there is individual data, there is user-generated content, and this is just a few of them. But you can imagine there are hundreds of data sets that we maintain and we make sure are of the highest quality, which this enables my teams and external customers to leverage by querying the knowledge graph. So let's talk through a couple examples of how customers are using us for the knowledge graph. On the left right now is site selection. So this, as I was talking about before, you're a new brick and mortar store and you're expanding locations. You're McDonald's, you're Starbucks. Where do I set up shop? Well, if you do this right, you want a high return on invested capital. You want to keep your operating expenses in bay, and you hopefully generate additional market share by going to do this. Well, the data sets you require, everything in underlined is data sets that we provide. So you may want to understand, okay, in this neighborhood, what are the demographics of it? Where do people shop? I would like to understand foot traffic. What are the actual stores that they visit? When do they visit it? Tell me about the buildings that exist. Give me POI information around it. Tell me about demographic, because I cater to the 18 to 24 market. Tell me where they exist. Does it exist in the locations that I want to set up? And then can I get external sales data? Can I understand how much people are spending? Maybe I'm selling an increased product, but this is important for me. Ideally, you would be able to look at your current locations and do these analysis against it, and then find trends that you say, okay, these are the criteria of where I should set up shop. You can do this against our knowledge graph. The next example is lead generation. Lead generation is about, I have a new product and I want to get it out to market. So ideally, you want to get your product to the right customer at the right time. So you want to keep your supply chain optimized. Again, similar to the other, you want your operating expenses at bay, and hopefully you can increase revenue and market share. For this, you need your historical sales data. This is data that the customer has and saying, okay, well, I released additional products before. Where did it do well? What customers did it do well on? What locations did it do well on? You also need very similar data sets. You need foot traffic, external sales data, demographics, understanding where do I have my consumers in the right place? And then you may want to include something like seasonal visitation patterns. Maybe my product does really well in Christmas. Maybe it does not so well in the beginning months of January. But how do I incorporate this in my analysis? These are two of hundreds of different analysis customers are doing right now to improve decision-making for their companies. I want to talk through some lessons learned we had while going through this. So for me and my team, I strongly believe the future of geospatial data will be the graph. And this is the future of unlocking geospatial data. And gone will be the days of dated GIS systems. So what we learned was access to high-quality geospatial data sets is paramount. Bad data, bad results, wasted time. We index all of our data. If you're familiar with tiling system, we use H3, and we have built additional technology called Hextile that allows us to join and recompute at any granularity. So effectively, you can join data at the size of a foot to an actual size of a city, and we do that things automatically for you. Being able to efficiently store and query large-scale planetary data is incredibly important. The ability to do this in minutes versus hours in days, really changes our ability to do things quickly and gain insights much, much faster. This has opened up our ability to innovate at speed for ourselves and our customers. We can add new data sets very easily. We don't need to create new data processing pipelines. We do not need to spin up new hardware. We're able to add this to the knowledge graph and be able to instantly access it. We're able to discover previously unseen patterns and trends. So an example would be, what we realized was when looking at a particular block of New York City, we saw that visits in total number weren't going down, but actual visits to the prominent locations around were. What we realized was people were visiting new places, which we didn't have a catalog of, which then became a feedback loop into our places data product to actually look at new venues much more quickly and use this as an input signal to find out if new places exist. A big part, and you'll hear this a lot if you're in any ML or AI talk, is having data, vast amounts of data with semantic meaning, is a great place to start the foundation for machine learning and AI applications. And so a big part of what we do, we have rebuilt many of our machine learning models and AI applications on the bedrock of our knowledge graph. Privacy first. We're Foursquare, we're a consumer app company, so privacy means a ton to us and our customers. One of the things that we are able to do is ensure that all the data that we have is protected, is either obfuscated or removed containing PII information. We can audit against this. We can have governance rules against it. The other big thing is the shift to, instead of having individual customer movement data, what we've moved to is aggregate insights on spatial units. So an example would be, instead of saying, okay, well, Ankit walked through this building and went to the next one, and you can actually follow me across, what we do is we provide only that people from this conference typically went to these locations. What it allows for is the same level of analysis that you can do, but it protects consumer privacy. So I think many of you all get this, but I want to put a fine point on this. The real question companies should be asking themselves is, how will I feel if my competitors leverage geospatial data to gain a competitive advantage? I think it's time for many companies to start investigating and leveraging geospatial data. According to the set of folks over here, it seems like many of your companies aren't, or you're not as familiar with geospatial data, but it truly is the future of unlocking a ton of potential for your business. That being said, I'm here at the conference. If you want to talk more about this, please feel free to find me.
Thank you so much.